everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're going to be looking at a phrase that we hear a lot, and it's a phrase that's really common when you hear people talking about retirement. And the phrase is, I retired from it all. Sounds simple enough, right? It's just like, you're done, you're walking away.
Exactly.
But our source material today, which is an article exploring the different emotions that come with retirement.
Yeah.
It hints that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface when somebody says that.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a lot more to unpack there.
So I guess to get started, what does it all even represent to people?
Well, it can be a lot of things, but, a good way to think about it is like escaping a cage.
Okay.
So for some people, that cage is, the rigid structure of a 9-to-5 job.
Right.
It's the schedules, the deadlines, all those, back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
They crave freedom and autonomy.
And honestly, that whole feeling of being caged in by work, I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Oh, for sure.
Even if we're not, anywhere near retirement age.
Yeah, definitely resonates with a lot of people these days.
Definitely. But the article also goes into some specific stories about people.
Yes.
And they get pretty thought-provoking.
Interesting.
There's Jim who, he was all about that hustle. He lived for those emails and deadlines.
Wow.
But then when he finally retires, alongside that, wave of relief comes this unsettling restlessness.
That's really interesting because, it highlights something that I think is really crucial.
Okay.
Which is that we tie so much of our identity to our work.
Yeah.
And when that's gone, it can create this void that's not so easy to fill.
Right.
It really makes you think about, who are you when you're no longer defined by what you do?
That's a really good point. And honestly, it makes you think about, even how we introduce ourselves in just casual settings.
Yeah.
What do you do is always one of the first things we ask.
It's so ingrained in our social interactions.
Yeah.
But retirement or any major life transition really forces you to kind of reevaluate that.
Yeah.
It's like you're reintroducing yourself not just to the world, but to yourself.
Yeah, that can be both exciting and terrifying, I imagine.
Yeah, definitely a mix of emotions.
But before we get too deep into that, there's another story in the article that takes a bit of a darker turn. And it's about Cassie, who, when she retires, instead of finding freedom, she kind of isolates herself. She cuts off all her obligations, becomes fixated on her finances,
Wow.
and basically disappears from her social circles.
So her experience, while extreme, brings up a really important point to consider.
Real.
Is escaping all obligations truly freedom?
Right.
Or is it potentially masking something deeper?
Yeah. And the article goes on and talks about that in a lot more detail.
It does.
But before I get to that, I think Cassie's situation also makes you think about the role of money in all of this.
Yeah.
For her, financial security seemed like that was it. That was the ultimate goal. That was the definition of freedom for her. But is that enough for true fulfillment?
That's a good question.
It's something to ponder, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, true freedom, I think, requires more than just, being financially stable.
Okay.
It's about finding that balance between having control over your time while still having purpose and connections and things that bring you joy.
Yeah.
So it's multifaceted for sure.
Definitely. So we've talked about the allure of it all.
Yeah.
And then we've talked about some potential downsides to escaping it completely.
Right.
But the article also goes beyond anecdotes like Jim and Cassie and really dives into the emotional roller coaster that people experience when they actually make that leap into retirement.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
Yeah, this is the juicy part.
Because it feels like there's this collective societal sigh of relief.
Oh, yeah.
When someone reaches retirement age. They've made it. They're free from the grind.
Exactly.
And the article talks about how that initial sense of liberation, it's very real.
I can see that.
I can see that too, No more alarm clocks, no more to-do lists.
Yeah.
Part of me finds that incredibly appealing.
Oh, for sure.
But do you think that feeling of relief is actually sustainable long-term?
Well, initially, it's probably fueled by a rush of dopamine.
Okay.
That sense of accomplishment, you hit a milestone, you're free.
Yeah.
But like any rush, it eventually fades.
Right.
And that's when those deeper emotional layers start to surface.
And one of those layers, as we touched on earlier, seems to be this fear of losing your identity.
Definitely.
If your work has defined you for so long, what happens when that's gone?
It can be very unsettling.
Yeah.
Because you might find yourself asking, who am I now? What defines me if not my career?
Right.
And this is where the fear of irrelevance comes in.
Yeah,
you know?
that article mentioned.
Yeah, you worry about being forgotten, losing your voice, fading into the background.
Right, and that's also very closely tied to your social connections as well. You know, work provides this built-in network.
Yes.
It's a sense of belonging.
Exactly.
And when you retire, you need to be more intentional about maintaining those ties.
Yeah.
And building new ones.
You really do.
Otherwise, instead of freedom, you end up with isolation.
Yes, exactly.
Like what happened to Cassie.
Exactly.
So it seems like retiring from it all isn't just about ending things.
Right.
It's also about starting something new.
Yes.
It's a chance to redefine yourself and what truly matters.
Absolutely. It's a period of reflection and reassessment.
Okay.
You have the time and space to look back, acknowledge your accomplishments, maybe even some regrets.
Yeah.
And ultimately figure out what brings you joy and fulfillment.
And speaking of fulfillment, the article offers some practical tips for a positive retirement experience. One that resonated with me was staying socially connected.
Oh, that's a good one.
Especially if you're stepping away from a work network.
Yes.
That seems crucial.
It is, absolutely, because humans thrive on connection. Studies consistently show that strong social ties are essential for both mental and physical well-being.
Right.
So whether it's nurturing your existing friendships, joining a club, or getting involved in your community, prioritizing social connections is key.
I like that. Another great tip was learning new skills.
Oh, yeah.
Retirement doesn't have to mean stagnation.
Absolutely not.
It can be a time for incredible growth and exploration.
It can.
Yeah.
You have the freedom to finally pursue those interests you never had time for before.
Right, like learn a language, take up painting master, a new instrument.
Exactly.
The possibilities are endless.
They are. And learning, keep your mind sharp and engaged.
So it seems like the underlying message here is that retirement isn't just about leisure.
Right.
It's about finding purpose.
Yes.
It's about shifting your focus from what you're retiring from to what you're retiring to.
Exactly. And that's why that phrase, I retired from it all, is so loaded. Because it's not a one-size-fits-all experience.
Right.
It's a deeply personal journey with ups and downs, challenges, and triumphs.
Yeah.
And I think, understanding those nuances can help us approach this phase of life or any major life transition, really.
Right.
With more awareness, compassion, and maybe even a sense of adventure.
I like that. There's so much to think about already.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
And before we get to some of the practical advice from the article, I wanted to touch on one more thing that really stood out to me.
Okay.
And it was this idea of retiring from it all, not just being about, retirement age.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the article focuses on, those traditional retirement years, but I feel like the emotional themes are pretty universal.
Oh, for sure.
We
all go through transitions in life.
Yeah.
Whether it's a career change, moving cities, or even just a shift in our relationships.
Right. It's like we all have our own version of it all.
Exactly.
That we might want to walk away from at some point.
Yeah, I like that.
And those it-all moments,
Yeah.
They often come with that same mix of emotions.
Right.
The relief, the excitement, maybe even some fear or apprehension about what comes next.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I've definitely felt that in my own life, even though I'm, nowhere near retirement age.
Yeah.
Like, remember a few years ago when I decided to switch career paths completely?
I do.
I was terrified, but also incredibly excited to start fresh.
Yeah, that's a great example because it takes courage to step away from something familiar.
Yeah.
Even if it's not working for you anymore.
Right.
And, the article actually touches on this idea of courage being essential for navigating retirement successfully.
Okay, so let's dive into some of that practical advice.
Okay, let's do it.
We were talking earlier about learning new skills.
Yeah.
What are some other things that people can do to make this transition, whether it's retirement or, something else more positive?
Well, building on what we were just talking about,
Okay.
Staying socially connected is huge.
Okay.
I mean, it's so easy to fall into isolation, especially if you're leaving a job that provided a lot of social interaction.
And that isolation can really feed into those negative emotions we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
The fear of irrelevance, the loss of identity.
Exactly. So you need to actively combat that.
Okay.
So think about, nurturing those existing relationships and seeking out new ones.
Yeah.
Maybe it's joining a book club, volunteering, taking a class, or even reconnecting with old friends.
Yeah.
The key is to stay engaged and build that support network.
And the article also talks about, the importance of finding purpose in this new chapter.
Yes.
And they really emphasize that purpose doesn't have to mean, paid work.
Right.
It's about finding activities that give you a sense of meaning and fulfillment.
Exactly. For some people, that might mean volunteering their time or skills to a cause they're passionate about.
Okay.
For others, it might be pursuing creative hobbies, traveling, or spending more time with loved ones.
I love that it really reframes retirement or any transition really as a chance to tap into what truly matters to you. And it really ties back to that idea of redefining yourself.
It does. You're no longer defined by your job title or your past accomplishments.
Right.
You have the opportunity to create a new identity based on your passions and values.
Okay, so how can people actually go about finding that sense of purpose?
That's a great question. Because it sounds great in theory, but I imagine it can be tough to figure out in practice.
Well, the article suggests starting with some self-reflection.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what are you passionate about? What activities bring you joy?
Yeah.
What skills or talents would you like to develop? Or maybe what kind of impact do you want to make on the world?
It's almost like you're creating a vision board for this next chapter, but instead of focusing on, material things, you're focusing on experiences and emotions.
That's a great analogy.
And once you have a clearer sense of what you want this new chapter to look like, you can start taking small steps towards making it a reality. Exactly. Maybe it's signing up for that pottery class you've always been interested in.
Right.
Or reaching out to that volunteer organization you admire.
Yeah.
It's about turning those aspirations into actions, however small they might seem at first.
It's about action.
It is.
And remember, it's a journey, not a destination.
Yes.
Your sense of purpose might evolve over time.
Oh, for sure.
And that's perfectly okay.
Of course.
Be open to exploring different paths and discovering new passions.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really great takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah.
Whether you're approaching retirement or simply facing a major life transition, embracing the unknown and being open to new possibilities is key.
It really is.
It really is. And speaking of not being alone, the article also emphasizes the importance of having a support system.
Oh, yes.
During these times of change.
Yeah.
Who are the people you can rely on, who can offer encouragement advice, or maybe even just a listening ear?
That's so crucial. It could be family friends, a therapist, or even a support group of people going through similar transitions.
Yeah.
Sharing your experiences and challenges with others can make a huge difference.
It's about normalizing those feelings of uncertainty and recognizing that, everyone's journey is different. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to retiring from it all.
And that's what makes this topic so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's deeply personal, and it touches on some universal human experiences.
Okay.
The search for meaning, the desire for connection, the need to feel relevant and valued.
Those are themes that resonate with all of us, regardless of our age or stage in life.
I think so, too.
I think so, too.
Absolutely. And I think by exploring those themes, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and what truly matters to us.
Okay.
And that understanding can empower us to make choices that lead to greater fulfillment both now and in the future.
It feels like we've barely scratched the surface here.
There's always more to explore.
But it's about time we bring this deep dive to a close.
Okay.
So what are your final takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think what's the big picture when it comes to this whole idea of retiring from it all?
I think the most important takeaway is that this phrase, even though it's often associated with, retirement, it's really a metaphor for any major life transition.
Okay.
It's about recognizing when something is no longer serving you and having the courage to step away.
Yeah.
Even if it's scary or uncertain.
It's like closing one chapter and starting a new one with all those blank pages full of potential.
Exactly. And you get to decide what goes on those pages.
Yeah.
It's a chance to redefine yourself, explore new passions, and create a life that feels more aligned with your values.
So for our listener who might be feeling stuck in their own version of it all, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
I would say start by asking yourself what it all even means to you.
Okay.
What are the things that are draining your energy?
Holding you back or preventing you from living the life that you truly desire.
Okay.
Once you identify those things, you can start taking small steps towards creating change.
That reminds me of something you said earlier about finding purpose.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be this grand sweeping thing.
Right.
It can be as simple as, reconnecting with a hobby that you used to love or setting aside time each day for something that brings you joy.
I love that. And it ties back to the idea that we have more agency than we often realize. We have the power to choose what we retire from, and what we invite into our lives.
And sometimes those choices can lead to unexpected adventures and incredible growth.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like embracing the unknown can unlock a whole new level of fulfillment.
It can. It absolutely can. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination.
Right.
It's about enjoying that process of self-discovery and being open to the surprises that life throws your way.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought.
Okay.
What at all do you want to retire from?
What chapter are you ready to close?
Yeah.
And more importantly, what new story are you ready to begin writing?
That's a powerful question, and I encourage everyone listening to really take some time to reflect on that.
Yeah.
Because the answers might surprise you, and they might just lead you to a more fulfilling and authentic life.
Beautifully said so. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep writing your own story.
And remember, you have the power to create the life you truly desire.